Combox. The game lives on. Welcome to Combox, everyone. Jarrod Kimber here for my show Wagon Wheel, which is your show to ask questions of me, Jarrod Kimber, where we wagon wheel them. I think that intro makes sense, and if it doesn't, we'll just edit it out in post. But essentially, if you want to ask us questions while you're watching on YouTube, the best way is via the super chat function. But a lot of you industrious people realize that it's a 24-hour day and you're not always available to watch us live. And so you support us on Patreon. You can go there on Good Areas podcast, and you can find us on Patreon, and you can support us and allows you to ask a couple of questions on this very show, like Adityan has, where he says, SA 2026 in the World Cup objectively feels like a better team than SA 2024. But it is so hard to believe that with Klaassen missing. Feels like there is a big unfillable hole in my life. How would you compare the two sides? I suppose having the Marco Janssen Bosch pairing made them feel like they had more batting. Whether it actually gives them more batting or not, it made them feel like they had more batting. So I suppose that helps them. I think they had more spin available. Like George Linder is a handy bowler, but he doesn't quite work with Maharaj, right? Because he's a similar kind of bowler to Maharaj. So having Tabraiz Shamsi as your extra spinner probably makes more sense. They had a Rabada that was in form. I think I like that batting. I mean, you're right, the Klaassen thing. I think I like that batting a bit more this time. So yeah, I think I felt this was a better side than last time. It just shows you how random these things are, though, too. You know, England made the semi-final both occasions, but I'm not sure that you would say... Yeah, I'm not sure that you would sit there and say that they are like a fantastic... I thought they probably just got into the semi-finals on both occasions. But I think if you're an England fan, you probably feel more optimistic now than you would have in the last World Cup. Right? But they've ended up with the same results. I mean, that's just kind of how these tournaments go. It's the way that T20 cricket is set up. Ajit says, rank the following finals upsets. India in 83, Pakistan in 92, Sri Lanka in 96, Australia in 23. It depends on what you mean here, Ajit. Because if you mean the tournament, obviously then I suppose India, it would be Sri Lanka. Yeah, it would be Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan, Australia if you're talking tournament-wide. If you're talking final, I think that's a little bit different, isn't it? I think if you're talking final, it's India, Pakistan, Australia, Sri Lanka. If you just look at the final, but if you look at the tournament, that's very different. Yeah, I think India, all things considered, they just weren't on the radar in that tournament, weren't even playing always particularly well in that tournament, and then went up against the team who should have won a third straight World Cup, right? So I think that probably has to rank as the best final and tournament. But of course, Sri Lanka's one is so much more random just because they weren't even thought of as a prospect really 6 months before that. And even then, barely in those 6 months coming out. And so to go from that to winning the tournament is an incredible turnaround. And Pakistan's turnaround is in the middle of the tournament. I think people thought it was a talented side. I've never seen the odds for that tournament, so I don't know exactly where we were. Ali says, what is the science of knuckleball? How and why does it behave differently with a cricket ball and a baseball? It doesn't actually behave differently between the two. It does essentially the same thing. By holding it in this particular way, it stops the ball from having backwards momentum, which obviously most balls when they're thrown or bowled have normal sort of backwards momentum on the ball, right? So it changes that. And then what you get then is it sort of erratically moves down. So you can see that with the cricket ball and you can see that with the baseball. The baseball one seems to be more juddery at times than the cricket ball one, although there's some great footage online of the cricket ball sort of almost like glitching as well. But I think the difference between the baseball and the cricket ball is the seam. And so quite often what happens with the cricket ball is it's swinging and kind of jittery at the same time. Whereas the baseball just has the sort of, I don't even know how to explain it. It looks like It looks like an Incredible or something, or like a ball that is not balanced correctly. And so that's the main skill that it has, and it just doesn't come out. And it doesn't react in any way. So without having the backwards momentum on the ball, it means it lands shorter than it should. So it sort of falls on you a little bit as well. And it doesn't bounce in the same way that a normal cricket ball would bounce because it doesn't have any back. So it's just got all these natural advantages to it that a normal slower ball would not have. PJ says, you've mentioned before that you don't really look at under-19 cricket when assessing players, but Bangladesh under-19 have a phenomenal record at the under-19 level. In fact, they're the only team. In fact, the only team they have a losing record against is India under-19. Clearly they don't have a talent problem, but why has the senior team struggled historically? So one of the big issues, and I don't know if this is the case in Bangladesh, but one of the big issues in under-19 cricket, why I'm not as interested in it, is there are all these different reasons why a lot of these players are not the age that they say they are, right? And so I would have to go through that. Secondly, there's not actually that much under-19 cricket. You're talking about, what, 8 or 9 games? Any team can go on a bit of a form run in 8 or 9 games. If it was, I don't know, something more like college basketball, right? Or lower division football, something like that, where you have like lots and lots of games, I think you could start to pick out patterns and everything else with certain players. It's also, from me, from a personality point of view, of like, there's 4,000 professional cricketers. It might be more than that now. Is it 4,500 across men and women's cricket? I have to know a huge amount of them. If I also have to add in the under-19s, it's just a step too far. I'm not saying I wouldn't be interested in it. I, like the idea of scouting and could be generally interested in it and have done scouting for agents and teams before. So it's not like I've never done it. But it's just a whole other thing that I would have to add. I think when it comes to the Bangladesh team, I can't give you an answer because I don't know enough about it. What I would say is that there is definitely amongst the Asian cricket community, as almost a general rule, they take underage cricket really, really seriously. Certainly the World Cup, in a way that most of the other teams around the world simply do not. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of the Asian teams do really well in under-19 cricket and don't always have the ability to translate that. Just because I think if you're putting more attention into it and it matters more, there's a guy who captained Australia in under-19 cricket, 2001-ish, 2002, a guy called Adam Smith, who captained Australia in under-19 cricket, and I think played 2 one-day games for Victoria. It's not even really a pathway, under-19 cricket. And I think England's probably a little bit different. I think New Zealand's starting to change. And some of these teams are starting to take it a little bit more seriously. But yeah, it's just a step too far for me to be interested, if I'm being honest. Adityan says, hot take. Is there a case for Rahul to be a better IPL bat than Kohli? Well, Kohli's 2016 was on a different level. Rahul's bad seasons have been much better than Kohli's. Even his mediocre seasons have a strike rate of around 135. Rahul's true numbers are better than Kohli's. I'm without looking at their true numbers, Adityan, I'm not saying you're wrong. You might be right. It's a possibility. I think the issue is that early on, Rahul had one of the great IPL seasons and then just never played like that again. Kohli's been pretty consistent, right? Up until recently where he's changed his game a little bit. But he's been pretty consistent of like, this is the way I play. This is why I play this way. He does have, weirdly for someone who's made, he doesn't have as many great IPL years. Like, he's not one of these players who's like just automatically every year going to be in your best 11. Like, that's just not something, best team, best league 11, and I think that is fascinating with him. But yeah, I'd have to go through it a little bit, pound for pound. But it's a fascinating one. Look, I'll take a photo, and I'll send it to the team and see what they make of it. I suspect it's still Coley, but maybe just purely on numbers, it's Tao Roll. Abe says, when a player has a breakout IPL season, are there any predictive indicators that will translate into a durable career? For example, the difference between success stories like Jaiswal or Samson and short-lived breakouts like Saurabh Tiwari or Paul Valhati. So what you're looking for when a player has a breakout is this sustainable? Neither of those two, neither Tiwari or Valhati are the ones I'm thinking of, but there is a player early on who I can't remember if it was the first IPL season or second IPL season. But there was a young player who came in and made lots of runs, and everyone was really excited. And I was like, but it's streaky batting. Like, if you watched it, there was lots of innings where he could have got caught. Eventually, teams are going to plan for him slightly better. What's he going to do then? He doesn't seem to have that many other options, right? That's what I'm looking. That's not an IPL thing. I'm looking at that for test players, for one-day players, for T20 players in any league in the world. That's what I'm looking for. Is this repeatable, what they have done? So to use a very different example, it's the Ollie Pope one, right? Where I was like, I can see why Ollie Pope's talented, but I can also see glaring holes that he has within his game that he's going to have to rectify really quickly because everyone's going to work them out. People are just going to bowl more spin to him, right? And people bowled more spin to him, especially when he was new to the crease. And it was clearly a huge gap in his game. And that's kind of what you were looking for, right? I think I talked about it with Cameron Green when he first came on the scene. I was like, think he's a really talented player, sees the ball really well, makes some really good decisions, but he's got a first-class technique, and this is Test cricket, and I really worry about his front pad, right? He changed that to try and fix it, and he ended up getting bowled more. These are the sorts, and I said the same thing about Travis Head, and he went off and fixed it and came back and was a star. So I'm never really looking at performance indicators. I'm looking, is this replicable year after year? Is there something that you're doing? So when Harsha Patel had that big year, right? I was like, this makes sense to me because of the amount of revolutions he's putting on each ball. Once we know how many revolutions he's putting on each ball, then I think we can really understand going ahead that this is not a fluke outlier season, that he will be consistently good over a period of time as long as he continues to put the revolutions on the ball, right? That's what I'm looking for with that sort of stuff. So when I see, a player just go absolutely beast mode in a season, it's like, is there a way to gamify for this later on? Is there a tactic? Is there a hole in the technique? Have people not worked it out? So the Suryavanshi thing at the moment is over third, right? Like, could you even have two players, one at deep backward point and one at deep third, and just keep bowling wide angled across him? And chances are he will eventually hit one straight up in the air, right? And be caught in one of those positions. I'm not saying that's 100%. That may not change him that much as a batter. He might just start whacking those balls through covers early on. And then when you move the field around, that's when he starts launching the big shots again, and you can't have deep third out. But the point being is that looks a little bit more sustainable than some other young players where I've seen where they've come through. I think it was it Muhammad Harris? Everyone was really excited about. And like the minute I looked into the data, I could be wrong on him, but I think it was he hit everything off right arm seamers only. And I've seen that off heaps of English players. So you just look at things that are sustainable against all kinds of bowlers in all kinds of conditions, right? It doesn't mean you have to be great against all bowlers. It just means that you can't be game planned against, right? The old Jason Roy thing against the ball spinning away when he starts playing reverse sweep is a perfect example of it probably happens too late in his career, but it just allows him to be Jason Roy again after a couple of years of really struggling when people did that. Let us take a quick break, and then after the break, there will be more of ComBox. We love the game, but we love the stories. Fans have stories. Former players have stories. Journalists have stories as well. ComBox brings them all together. The game lives on. All right, welcome back. Hurt says, when when batters age, you would think that their reaction time is the first to decrease, thereby affecting their play against pace. But conversely, it feels like they become worse against spin before their play against pace drops. Is agility the first skill to drop before reaction time? Yeah, so we've actually dealt with this in the book, I think, Hurts, a little bit. That was something that we realized. I think it might have been Emil Dacey that first found this. I think it was him. I know he's done a lot on age curving anyway, so I'll give it to him even if I'm wrong. But yeah, you certainly have a situation where we would expect people's play against spin to be better, and I think it is there's actually a lot of standing still against pace, right? And there's a lot of game theory against pace. Like you're basically making decisions based on predictions anyway when you're playing pace. So maybe the reactions and everything else, well, eventually you'll get to a level where it will really affect pace. I think in the short term, what it will affect is just your ability to maybe score as quickly against pace, right? Whereas against spin, you actually do need to move around quite a bit, and you're still trying to pick the ball up just as quickly as you are against pace. It's just in a different way. So I do think that there is a part of it. But yeah, it's something that surprised me, but I think you can work it back intellectually, and it makes more sense when you say it over time because of the distances you have to cover playing spin, and maybe that goes before the eyes do. I don't know. In general. Will says, is it insane to think that the annual T20 World Cups would be better than the current situation? I think people would better understand we just do this every year than this weird on-off, stop-start schedule. I think some of the problem with the World Cups has been it's more than just the on-off part of it. It's also that we went, 5 years without having one at one stage? Well, so we've never even got in a rhythm for two T20 World Cups. We had the ones that were 9 months apart back in 8, 9, 9, 10, whenever those were. We've had all these weird World Cups, right, where we go 5 years and then we go 9 months between them. So I think there's an argument to be said for what you're basically pointing out here, and I don't think it's necessarily incorrect to say that either. But I think that the other thing that I would say on that is I just don't think T20 World Cup every year is a good move for cricket. I don't think it's a solid move for the sport. Person McPersonface says, what do you think the impact will be, if any, if the Glazers are able to acquire the IPL franchise? Do you see a future of more modern, non-Indian IPL owners? Was surprised to see them and a few others in this list of prospective RCB owners. I think that I've talked about this before, and we'll probably try and do an episode, some sort of project on it coming up on the Acquired podcast, which has changed definitely American money when it comes to the IPL. I think the other issue is that there are lots of, India is not particularly an easy country to do business with if you're not in India. So there are all these legality type things and procedural type things that are quite tricky. Taxes, all those sorts of things. On top of that, you then have the fact that, let's be honest, Lalit Modi didn't exactly run the IPL brilliantly when it started. So there's some very interesting ownership stuff. I know there's a lot of owners that are concerned at the fact that in the IPL, the BCCI gets 50% of the money. That's not something that you see in other leagues around the world. So I think that had a problem. I think people had to sort of trust that this would be around for a long time. But now with all those things happening, I think it's inevitable. There's already American ownership within the IPL structure, of course. It's just more that now they're trying to buy teams outright. So is it Redbird was maybe the first, I think. So that was already involved in the IPL. I just think now that people just understand it. I think the Acquired podcast, it's worth finding it if you haven't. But I think one of the things it really does is just break down how quickly this has got so big in a way that, if you're an American, it makes sense. And also, what are you investing in? So a lot of people in sport at the moment, the esport thing didn't quite get to the level that everyone thought it was going to, but a lot of people have already invested in that. You've got paddle and pickleball, which it feels like everyone I talk to is invested in one of paddle and pickleball, which means it's probably already overexposed. What are the other big sports products, right? Women's sport, to a certain point, has already got, it was probably back in that esports, or on the back of esports, that period. There's still more that can be done in women's sport, but that's another one that is being invested in. So I think if you're, and a lot of these people now are investing in sports because sports rights just keep going up. That may not happen forever, right? But at the moment, they just keep going up. So if you can get in, it was funny. I was talking to a couple of people about the RCB and the Rajasthan thing. And at one stage, I don't know what the bids are at the moment, but at one stage, the bids were like 300 million apart. And I was like, if I only have to pay $300 million more only for RCB, I've got a big city, I've got, a really good fan base, I've got media all around me. I think that's a really good franchise to own. But if the difference then gets to, between 5, 6, 7, 800 million, right? Then I'm like, all I really want is for my franchise to keep being worth more money, right? And Rajasthan will keep being worth more money if I can manage to afford to own it for 7 years, 12 years, 15 years, and the IPL keeps growing at the rate it is. You are talking about a substantial amount of money that franchise is worth, right? And so I think that is the reason we're seeing these sorts of people. I mean, obviously the Glazers are already own one C20 team, I want to say. Is that right? I think at the moment they own one. So there's certainly that is already happening. Unless they own two. There's problems with the Glazers, obviously. If you're a football fan, you'll know about the way that they kind of set these things up. But you can definitely, it's not just going to be them. It's so many people. Some of the bids are wild when you have a look at who's involved in them. Mob says, with regard to the Big Bash expansion, New Zealand interests are rumoured to be demanding 4 New Zealand teams in the Big Bash. This would obviously be declined due to dilution in existing teams' equities. However, suppose it's greenlit and we have Auckland, Manganui, Wellington and Christchurch teams in the Big Bash. Could you see rapid Asia-Pacific expansion, Singapore, Hong Kong, Samoa, and could such a regional tournament grow to rival, not beat the IPL? It would never rival the IPL. I don't think anyone would believe that is the case. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe. No, I don't think anyone in cricket thinks that. It's just talking about the IPL rivaling the NFL at this point. Like, you're not doing that with another T20 league based in Australia and New Zealand. But yeah, I do think there is something to be said of, I think what's happened in New Zealand is Big Bash want to give them one side, or Cricket Australia want to give them one side, and New Zealand Cricket probably want 2 or 3. And so they've asked for 4. They'll probably try and argue it to be somewhere in the middle. I don't think one side really helps New Zealand all that much. I think 2 sides is much better. I think 3 sides would be ideal for them. I think once you get to 4 sides, you have to be like, there are not that many people in New Zealand, right? Like a lot of these players will just be Australian club cricketers again, playing in those leagues, which may defeat the purpose anyway. So it doesn't really help all that much. But yeah, I think you can certainly do that from that perspective. And then Hong Kong is Hong Kong just too far away for a Big Bash team? Singapore, Papua New Guinea, Fiji, I just don't know. I think it would be great. And I've said, I actually think I mean, we could never do it now because of the SA20, but I think it would have worked better if you had, 4 teams in South Africa, 6 teams in Australia, 2 or 3 teams in New Zealand would have been ideal. But unfortunately, that's no longer viable or ever going to happen or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, it's that's sort of where we've ended up, right? With that. But I think it's a fascinating thing as well. New Zealand is talking about having their own league. I just don't think they need to be. But there's no point in them having one side in the Big Bash. I think it has to be more than that. Anil says, do we have any data on Test cricket viewership numbers by age? Are the youngsters watching enough Test cricket? And if not, shouldn't it be a cause for concern? So in general, and all the numbers of Test cricket have gone up around the world, not in every single market, but because it's just easier to view Test cricket now, the numbers are actually pretty good. I would say at the moment that if you compare it to the other formats, it's going to have the least amount of kids. But I don't think it doesn't have like a golf problem. That's what you don't want to be. I've said this story before, but when we were doing Death of a Gentleman, everyone was like, cricket's dead. Look, golf's done everything right. Cricket's done everything wrong. And by the time the film came out, golf was dying because young people just didn't pick it up because they went to cycling and now they're doing paddle, right? They're just not picking up golf the way that they had before. Whereas we are getting people who are coming over from T20 cricket to Test cricket. Maybe not in like crazy numbers, but Test cricket still has really strong numbers and it's not just old people watching. So it's a much better age curve than say, some of the other sports that are struggling with that. But yeah, I mean, Arnold, this would be great if anyone actually ran Test cricket and had a say in it. That's what they would do. But since there is no one to do that and no one involved, here we are. Abe says, from a data point of view, is there any way to see a coach's distinctive influence fingerprint on a team? I'd imagine there'd be a lot of noise from joint decisions they make with selectors and captains, not to mention circumstantial factors. Yeah. It's really hard. So one of the things they do in the NBA, and I think they might do this across most American sports, is they compare coaches to the expected win tally at the start of the year. So at the start of the year, the markets and the odds work out roughly what they think how many games each team will win, right? And then you are then judged on whether you've delivered more than that or you've delivered fewer than that. And of course, they're going on the talent. The problem with that is over a period of time, the markets are going to start to factor in the coaches as well, right? And give bonus wins just because that team's been coached but by a particular person who's had long success. I think that though, that as a general rule, if you could work out the talent and then just run it through a simulator of the two teams before the start of play, based on what the toss did, and you could do that for every single game, you could probably come up with a pretty good idea if a coach is overperforming or underperforming. That said, I don't know if we play enough cricket games to be able to tell any of that, right? Like, you need so much data to be able to get that. It's just really hard. But how about we start with the fact, Abe, that there is not a cricket website in the world that I'm aware of that actually has coaches win-loss percentage. Let's start there. Hayden says, how far away are we from having a woman coach a men's franchise on national side? I don't think we're far away, Hayden. It's quite interesting. We've seen other sports around the world with women's coaches come through. So not always head coaches, but even assistants. And we haven't really seen that at the top level of men's cricket all that much. Obviously, there was the Multan Sultans a couple of years ago. We've had, Belinda Clark had a really important role in Cricket Australia, even if it wasn't coaching, but, a really important role. We've had SA20 assistant coaches before. I think it was SA20. And we've had a few others scattered around. Obviously, Sussex was another one. So, yes, it's there. We're not in a situation where we've had a lot of really uber successful women coaches who are like pushing for that other thing. And also, if you're a women's coach, so let's say Charlotte Edwards, right? Incredible record as a coach. Does it actually make sense for her to switch over? So you'd almost have to be someone who came up through the assistant coaching roles, right? Rather than go the other way. So for someone like Matthew Mott, who coached men, then women, then men, I don't even know who's coaching now, right? That is, I think for him, he was more interested in the job. Whereas if I was a woman and I was like Charlotte Edwards and really successful, I think there would be a part of me that would be like, I can just coach women forever. Why would I want to take a men's job? And unless there's a burning desire for it. And there aren't that many Charlotte Edwards, right? So I think if you look at when I first started in cricket, it was actually quite rare to have a woman coaching a woman's side, right? And it's still, and so until we get past that, I think there's an issue. Having said that, I don't think we're that far away from an outlier doing it. Like someone who I haven't even thought of, right? Just coming up from nowhere and getting a job. And also a bit like the Multan Sultans, where, their owner was trying to make a point as much as anything else. There are already women good enough to coach men's franchise teams and who would do fantastic jobs in it, right? So, but it just takes someone to give them that role. And I don't think we're like a million miles away from that happening right at the moment. Cricket has never finished at the close of play. It lives in the arguments, the memories, the comment sections. Cricket makes you talk. Combox is entering that chat. Ajit says, why did Australia persist with Marcus Stoinis and ODI set up for so long? Not questioning his talent or value as a T20 player, but I never felt like he had the same impact in ODIs, especially looking back in his numbers now. I think they always thought, and I think a lot of people in Australian cricket always kind of believed that there was a lot of unlocked talent with Marcus Stoinis. I know from having had a lot of conversations with people over the years that they always felt that like I know people who even think he could have played Test cricket. And so I always felt that they felt that they could get something more out of him. But at the same time, he was doing so well in T20 cricket that I think they couldn't get over the fact that it wasn't working as well in one-day cricket. The only thing I would swing back on is he's not a bad defensive bowler in one-day cricket. And so you're probably looking at it from the perspective of, I think he averages 26, 27, mid-league strike rate for someone like him. Like his T20 numbers are so much better, you're right. In T20 cricket, he doesn't actually bowl that much. Takes a lot of risks, gets a lot of wickets, but gets whacked. In one-day cricket, that sort of hitting the pitch middle overs bowler who's strong, who can bowl with the cross seam and everything, was actually quite handy. And so it gave them another seam bowling option. It meant they didn't have to, use some of their more specialist bowlers to bowl bouncers and everything else. And I think he goes at about 5.9 runs and over. Doesn't sound great, but when you're like the 5.5 bowler, right? And you've got, Maxwell or whoever else bowling a few overs as well. He's not going at more than a run a ball, and in their mind, they're getting death hitting from him. I think the issue with Marcus Stoinis is he couldn't do that in one-day cricket the way he could everywhere else. But I think also it was part of it. Maybe they just didn't think there was anyone better to come through, right? And he's working in one format, and they're just kind of, maybe there was a bit of format bleed there, and they weren't looking at his one-day numbers enough. Ali says, a little bit off topic, but regarding SRL. I noticed the people in India really love their billionaires, franchise owners, but they are not as championed in the UK, Europe, and are actually vilified in Pakistan based on my anecdotal experience. A bit of generalization, but can you share your experience with them in the UK, Australia, and South Africa? I'm trying to think. I think there's something. It's probably changed in America, but I think even a few years ago in America, billionaires were really, really respected. And I think social media has probably changed that, right? Because now you can see Mark Zuckerberg be uncomfortable talking about coffee, and it's hard to be really impressed by him. Like every second tweet Elon Musk sends out, it's kind of, even if you're a Musk fanboy, sometimes you must be like, maybe just don't send this one. Maybe just occasionally keep one for drafts. Then, of course, I think there is a big movement towards, I think, younger people in general either become fanboys of billionaires or enemies of billionaires in a way that I don't remember people of my generation doing as much. There were obviously, Rupert Murdoch was an enemy to a lot of people, but I don't remember people having that many takes on billionaires back. And again, some of this is the social media, the world that these current lot live in. I'm not sure I've seen that India love their billionaires. I don't think they've turned on the ownership groups in the IPL as much at the moment, which is interesting, Ali. That will come. But there are some ownership groups that certainly had that, but I think that will start to come. But yeah, it's a fascinating question. I'm not sure I have a great answer on it. PJ says, how would you structure a breakaway test or first class based franchise league, bearing in mind different seasons, all hosted in one country, playing blocks of games in neutral venue, playing home and away when the weather allows it? I have done this before, PJ, but I'm trying to think of what I came up with. Yeah, you would basically play. You would play very similar to how Test cricket is played at the moment. But perhaps what you would try and do is maybe fit it into the period of the year that is not affected by the IPL at the moment. So could I go July to February and I can play cricket in pretty much every country I want? And you can also, in certain places like Australia and South Africa, you can play back-to-back series, right? New Zealand, you can play back-to-back series. West Indies, England, you can play back-to-back series. So I think where possible, you try and play back-to-back series of, let's say, 3 games, 2 games, however you want to do it. So 2 games at home, 2 games away, and things like that. I think that's what I'd be looking for. But I'd have to. I have written about it before, PJ. I wrote about it a lot when I thought it was a potential possibility of happening. I haven't heard anything, so I don't have anything on it at the moment. But yeah, the neutral stuff, I wouldn't be that worried about neutral games. You want home fans to come to games. Will says, what do you make of Liam Livingstone blasting the current England regime for a lack of support and running a clique? I mean, does anyone in the world not think they were running a clique? I've done a short video on this. I'm not sure if it's up yet, but I think I got Liam Livingstone wrong as a player. My thought process watching him was he makes so many errors, he must not be a particularly intelligent cricketer. So not a person, but a cricketer. But then I was listening to the TalkSport interview he did a few months ago where he said a few things. And as you said, Will, he's gone studs out now, right? All in on England. And they were talking about him asking too many questions. And I know he rang Rob Key and Rob Key didn't want to talk to him one day and everything. And then I thought about the fact he bowls off spin and leg spin. I wonder if he's a cricketer who thinks too much. And he kind of has this constant overthinking, questioning sort of style to his cricket. Fine, there are lots of good players who do that. Not having it, Mitchell Johnson was maybe the poster child for us. Exactly the same kind of player that I thought he doesn't know enough about cricket. And then afterwards, I'm like, he might know too much about cricket. He might have just needed to just go back and wang it more often. And so I think what we're seeing with Livingstone, we saw with Andy Flower. We saw players come in with Andy Flower, and Andy Flower had such a dogmatic, all or nothing approach that just does not work for everyone. And we started to see the cracks of the people that did not work on. There was another coach that I had in mind as well for this, who now I've forgotten. We might see it in the future with Gambia. No, Langer. Langer's the other one, right? Langer was the one I was thinking of, where you have this situation where you think to yourself, it has to be Langer's way or no way at all. And eventually the players just turn on Langer, right? Because of that. He can't move with them. And McCullum, Langer, Flower, these guys have all had success, right, at times, and have been, lauded for it, right? There are huge fans of their coaching styles out there. But they're also very didactic and dogmatic about how they coach games. And I think that the players that don't fit into that really struggle, right? A bit like Glenn Maxwell and Darren Lehman back in the day. And I think that Liam Livingstone clearly needs a different kind of coaching style. And Brendan McCullum does not want to give a different. It's vibes, it's aura, it's confidence. That's all I need to give you. You know how to play cricket. Go play cricket. Clearly, Liam Livingstone doesn't need that, right? And that's why, and we've talked about this a lot, these coaches that only have one method, that's the difference between them and the great coaches who have the ability to coach every player individually. I'm not slagging off any of these guys. I think Andy Flower is probably a better version of this now if he came back. And even Justin Langer perhaps might be better if he was to come back into it, because, now. But McCullum, I don't think wants to do that. And so I just think that this is the only player who's done this publicly. But I could tell you that, like, off the record, there have been other players who have sort of said similar things of like, I just want to know what line and lengths to bowl, right? I just want to know if I can fix my technique a little bit. And that isn't kind of how they lead the game, right? Person says, how do youth academies work in the IPL? If there's an auction, what's the incentive if someone else can just bid for a player that went through your academy? Yeah, it's that, really. I suppose the only thing is you could train them specifically and you could hide them a little bit more at times. But yeah, you can't keep them. There's a lot of issues with the way the IPL has been set up that hasn't matured yet, and I think this is probably one of them. Yeah, I just think this is, at the moment, when it hasn't quite worked those sorts of things out. Mob says, what is the process like behind the scenes for a successful ghostwriting collaboration? Well, I can tell you this, that I've never done it, so I'm not probably the perfect person to ask on this. I think I've talked about before, I've had people ask, I've had even offers at times, but it just hasn't quite worked. One criticism from the mighty Combox Discord of armchair analysts is that Haig's biography lacks the distinct voice of the great Wasim Akram, and rather sounds like Gideon just writing. Could you talk about that balance or other technical considerations? This is hard for me because I haven't done it. I think my writing style is so specific that it would be tough for me to be able to do it. But the reason that most people can pull this off, Mob, is because all they do is just transcribe the person talking. And I think Gideon is a writer, and so it would be much harder for him to do that. But this is what great script writers and speech writers do, right? It's that ability to find the way the person speaks and do that. And I don't remember reading. I read that as a Gideon book. So you're probably right. But I always thought it was a Gideon book. That's why Wasim wanted to do it with him, right? He didn't want just his voice. He wanted the combination of the two. And that's kind of the way that I felt that book was. That's probably, if I was writing a book with someone, how it would come out, I would assume. But yeah, it is a very different. The great ghost writers are very, very good, though, at working out how to use that other person's voice without making it, without them losing the way they've said things, but still making the writing make sense. Okay? So bad ghostwriter will just sort of transcribe the interviews and just fix up little bits. There's a great scriptwriter, ghostwriter will kind of take the book once they have the transcriptions and then rewrite the transcriptions, but try and keep the voice of the person while making it, a top quality thing. And I think that's the difference. But as I said, I'm not an expert on this. I'm trying to think if I've ever written for anyone else. It's very rare. I think my writing, especially in the UK, is seen as so weird and offbeat that people just don't think. Whereas, I was a scriptwriter, so technically I could always write for other people. That's kind of what you do in script writing. Anil says, would runs per over be a better metric to track batters similar to economy rate? Historically, so we get this sort of question a lot. Honestly, for me, it doesn't matter. The issue here is that we do runs per over for bowlers and we do runs per ball for batters. I don't really care which one we do. I'm happy to flip them around in either direction, right? It's just, but it is a bit silly that we do two different metrics for both. I know that CricViz, I think, tried to change this once, but just it's getting general. You have to get everyone to basically buy into it. Historically, what kind of initiative is required at a broadcast level to make changes like these? It's not hard to do it at a broadcast level. The issue is that you then have to spend all your time explaining it. So is it worth it? I think what happens is over time, there are some things that change naturally, and people can get on board with it, right? And so it's just already happening. If everyone started talking in this way, like fans across the line, commentators, writers, it would just change. But where we're stuck at the moment is we kind of need that movement to happen, and it just hasn't happened as of yet. All right, we've got some super chats here. Arnav says, is cricket, like football, moving towards systems and tactics than individual brilliance? I think at any one stage in a sport's development, you're probably going to be leaning more on one side than the other. I think the more data we get, the more we understand that a whole team can have a plan, and that can be quite effective. Whereas before, it was up to the individual. Like you hear this from bowlers. When I did bowling meetings, they'd be like, "I've got him skip," sort of thing, and I'd be sitting there going, "You may not be bowling to this guy. What if you're not bowling, or you've already bowled your spell when he comes into bat?" So actually understanding the entire plans and everything else is a far better way of doing that. But individual brilliance within that is then the difference maker, right? Because if everyone has really good plans or strategy or everything else and are of a similar level, then that's when the brilliance comes in. So I think it's always a push and pull. But yeah, I would say probably in sport, we are getting much more algorithmic, systemic. I don't know, however you want to word that. Vinay says, in what way and how much has the absence of international cricket in Pakistan affected their development? I think for Pakistan, I think a lot of the issues that they have had over the last couple of years would have happened if they'd stayed in international cricket. But where they're really missing out is probably, they basically didn't make any money for however, like outside of ICC events. They really didn't make any money bilaterally because they couldn't play at home and even host a PSL at home, right? And so because of that, you end up with a situation where there was a professional gap already opening up between the major teams and teams like Pakistan and below. And then not having the money also meant that was wider. Now, I think some of it wouldn't be fixed by money because I just think that Pakistan have had more money over the last couple of years and they're still unprofessional. But I do think that was probably the wrong time for that to happen because that's when we saw, that's probably the first time ever where the richest boards became the best at cricket, right? So England, India, Australia. If you go through the history of cricket and you look at who the richest boards are, it hasn't always been linked to who the best teams are, right? And so that was the period where it started to matter because the sport was moving, right? And Pakistan didn't have that. So I think that is quite important. But realistically, when it comes down to it, there is no reason for Pakistan to be run as unprofessionally as they are. And I don't think you can just put that at the feet of international cricket. Ashish says, Pakistan were playing pretty modern T20 cricket in the initial years. Did the fact that they kept losing to Kohli change the way everyone plays in the system when India itself was moving away from that play style? No, I think you're right. I think early on, they had Afridi, right? And they had a bunch of strike bowlers. They then changed from that kind of, not that Afridi was there on his own, but then they sort of changed from that to having a bunch of anchors and strike bowlers. That would still be a great team, right? If you have multiple strike bowlers available to you at all times, and you know that your team's going to make at least par in every innings, you would do that. The problem with Pakistan is that they haven't been producing strike bowlers, and their batters haven't moved on. They don't make enough runs, and they don't make them quick enough. So, if you go back to when 2022, I was saying then that the issue with Pakistan is that they are playing on one side of the ball. But the strength of that is that one side of the ball they have is absolutely fantastic, right? Like it's brilliant. And so it is always a risk with that. The minute Shaheen went down and Nazim hasn't, been able to be as consistent as they want, Shadab's had issues as well. Like they've actually had some physical issues here, but they haven't then got that conveyor belt that they used to have, right? Of just like, well, find another guy to bowl at 90 miles an hour, left arm, swing it both ways or whatever it may be. And so I do think there is an element there. I do think that their structure, if you go through the history of Pakistan cricket, has mostly created anchor type players. Inzi was really exciting when he started, and he goes back. And they had Imran Nazir, who didn't quite make it, one of the lost talents. They haven't, and Shahid Afridi was an all-rounder. They really haven't had that many attacking batters since Syed Anwar as a specialist, like consistently. So I think they always diverted towards that, but they could do that because their team always had great bowling. And their team no longer has great bowling, so you can't get over it. Vamsy says, is Jasprit the greatest T20 player ever? No, I don't think so. I saw AB de Villiers say that. I'd have to go through it. I've never actually thought about, well, I haven't thought about this in ages. I mean, Andre Russell is so hard to beat, right? Because of the all-round nature of what he did. But he's also now played on a couple of years where he hasn't been as good. So I'd have to look at almost the peaks. Also, Bumrah can only shape 24 balls in a game. So what's Andre Russell going to be shaping? 30, 34? What's Chris Gale going to be shaping? What's AB de Villiers going to be shaping? I think you kind of have to weigh that in a little bit. But he's obviously in the conversation. I don't think anyone would argue that. Noel says, is Samson good enough to play number 3 in the test squad? I don't know if I would make the change. I think if I was going to pick someone, I'd look for a number 3 who's just a number 3. You're basically doing another Sai Sudarshan, but with a 31-year-old, right? You're picking someone who doesn't average 40 in first-class cricket, who's been working in other formats of recent times, and then you're hoping that he's going to come into what is one of the toughest roles in modern cricket. No one's making runs at first drop, right? Like, it's really tough. And then you're saying, are we going to play you all around the world? I'm not saying he couldn't make it work, but would he be a massive success? No. I think there are better options than him. But like, let's say he wasn't playing in India and he had all the same skills, he'd be in the top 4 for other sides, right? Like, I think he's worthy of playing that, but I'm not sure if I'm India. I'm not sure what the point is to pick him. Crazy says, what do you think is the best? Oh, sorry. Who do you think is the best all-four batter that has played, or Kohli or AB, or does anyone else in this conversation? Well, I mean, Viv Richards is the other one, and Sachin Tendulkar. They didn't play T20 cricket. Well, Sachin didn't play much T20 cricket. So a lot of people don't like it when you say all format, but that's on them. But yeah, you can't get away. Viv Richards is a top 5 one-day batter at worst, and probably top 1 or 2, and is a top 10 test batter pretty easily, at least top 15 at worst. Kohli's top 5 at worst, ODI, and depending on how you rank him, far higher than that. AB is probably the same. T20 cricket, if you really rate internationals more, I think Kohli gets a bump. If you're just looking at T20 as a whole, maybe more the way that I do, he probably goes down a little bit. But yeah, they're the 4 guys. I think me and Deepak did a podcast about this. If you want to go check it out, we talked about this stuff forever. Walnut says, do you believe Fatima Sana has the potential to be an Imran-like figure for the women's cricket in Pakistan? I mean, no, just because... I mean... that Imran Khan has had one of the biggest impacts of any professional sportsman in the history of all sport. Right? Just ridiculous. I mean, think about this. He was a household name in what? 5, 6 countries, I would say. And I mean a household name. I mean people who didn't really follow cricket knew who Imran Khan was. He's then gone on to be a political figure as well. He's now, again, in the news. I mean, he really is one of the most fascinating cricketers and athletes that we have ever had. Just his playing career is fascinating. So no, I don't think Fatima Masana's about to do that, right? If you're talking about from a cricket perspective, I think at the moment, I'm trying to think of where she kind of fits in. I suppose she can have a... Just having a look at her record. It feels to me that she's maybe more towards your fourth or fifth best bowler and your sixth or seventh best batter. And if you look at Imran, he was at times their best bowler, right? And probably was at times their fourth or fifth best batter as well. Now, that's late career Imran. She's what, 23, 24? So there's a long way to go. I'd be shocked if she has that kind of an impact. And also, the other thing is that Pakistan men's cricket was on its way up. It would have been on its way up without Imran, right? I think there's some interesting things with Pakistan women's team. I'm not sure. I think they're going to be a genuine like semi-final chance within the next 4 to 6 years. But the other thing worth remembering about Imran is his career is like 23 years long. You know, who knows how many different eras of Fatima we will go through. So yeah, I mean, it's possible, but it's not possible that she has an Imran-like career. I don't think it's possible for another cricketer to have an Imran-like career. I'm not sure it's possible for Imran to have an Imran-like career, and yet here we are. Jack says, is there a universe where Bumrah becomes as good as he is now across formats if he were born in another cricketing nation with test status? Yeah, I think so. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't have been. I mean, it's a hard question to answer, Jack, because his skills, I think, are partly on the back of... It'd be like looking at a tall Australian bowler and go, you know, would he be great if he came from India? I'm like, yeah, of course, because look at all of his skills, but he wouldn't have developed the same way if he was from India. And I think it's the same with Bumrah. He wouldn't actually have developed the same way if he was from the West Indies or South Africa or New Zealand or Australia, right? Like, he just wouldn't have. That sort of rubber ball nature of it wouldn't have been the same. But if you're just looking at pure talent and the way he's gone, I still think he would have been fantastic at all those things. But yeah, he needed India the way that Glenn McGrath needed Australia, the way that Wasim Akram needed Pakistan. But they're still incredibly talented bowlers. I don't think they'd be failures in other teams, but they would be different because that's how environments are. You know, if we ever do the Art of Bowling book, there's a whole chapter I want to talk about the development of left arm finger spin in different parts of the world. It's not that Ashley Giles doesn't want to bowl around the wicket, pitch the ball on middle stump and spin it away from the bat and look sexy. It's just that in England, part of his job is to bowl outside leg stump and to dry the game and be dull. That's just something that happens a lot more than it does in Asia when the wickets are more in his favour. Beyond the Boundaries says, is a test cricket team viable without domestic first-class cricket? Context, West Indies first-class season being reduced to 3 matches and teams. It's tough. It's very tough. I think first-class cricket is one of the most flawed parts of cricket that has ever existed and still the best way to learn how to play test cricket. I think West Indies domestic cricket has been in a hellhole for a long time. So changes were inevitable. I can't see how you get better at test cricket if your players are just not used to playing first-class cricket. Doesn't mean I think everyone needs to... Like, once you're in the side and you're of world-class and you're a professional, I don't think it matters as much. You know, this whole thing of every time a team fails, the players should go back to first-class cricket. That's not really how it works. It does for certain players, but as a general rule, that's not how it works. But getting good in the first place, I think is much tougher if you haven't played a lot of professional first-class cricket. And I think that's the issue here. Ant says, I know women have mechanical restrictions. Mechanical restrictions that make 120 kilometers per hour-ish the upper end of bowling speeds. But could female batters play 140 to 150 kilometers an hour just as well as men? They wouldn't play it just as well as men just because they're not as exposed to it in general. So no, I don't think they would play it as well. But one of the big issues with women's cricket is that I remember talking to this with a men's player, and he goes, if you watch these women, they're pretty good at handling 130, 135 Ks. They still get rolled a little bit because they don't play it as much. Because once you get past about 15, you start playing women's cricket, and so the speeds just drop. But most of them have played pretty quick players before, and they still play against them in the nets at times, right? Like there is more a crossover that just happens naturally. So women are probably more used to facing bowlers that it's a little bit quicker, and then they get to test level or international level, and the bowling is a little bit slower. But it's such a fundamentally different game. I've told this story before, but the ECB used to have a media manager, Hen, who's like really, really tall. I don't know what their height is, but way taller than most spinners in women's cricket would be. And so even though the pace was similar to what the women would bowl, I think with Hen, with the extra bounce and everything, it didn't make it particularly good practice, right? This is the story I was told by Hen, who might have just been saying this because, you know, they were getting hammered. I don't know. But so it's a very different kind of batting. So there are women who do go up against men in the nets a little bit and bowling machines and everything else. But it's a fundamentally different game. It's kind of like the conversation we had about Bradman. Could you take Bradman like at the age of 20 and bring him into modern cricket, right? The issue that Bradman would have is that the trajectories are completely different. So everything that you're brought up on is a little bit different. Now, women have a little bit more of that. But if you have a look at the bowlers who bowl at 125, 128 Ks, they still do bowl people quite a bit in women's cricket, right? So if that was at 130, 140, 150, I would assume that you would have that more often. Now, if that's all they played, they would find a way of doing it. But I still think there is a natural limitation on that. In the same way that it probably is for returning a serve in tennis. I don't know. Maybe mixed doubles is the best way of working this one out. Paris says, hey, Jarrod, any thoughts on Livingston's comments on key and base? Yeah, so I've already mentioned them, but I do think it is fascinating. And I'll give you one more thing about this, because this is something that I did want to kind of bring up, which is I think that cricket coaching comes out of two really fascinating parts. The Australian cricket coaching really comes from rugby league, rugby union, Aussie rules, right? So that is kind of what dominates cricket coaching at the international level when we start. The other cricket coaching is very much school-led, right? And so both of those are not actually how you would set up cricket coaching if you were just like starting from scratch for top level performance teams. Because what the Aussie rules rugby one is it's more about effort. I know there's lots of techniques and little things in those sports, but it's about effort. It's about team unity. It's about having everyone exactly the same. Whereas cricket is a team sport with all these micro individual skills sections within it, right? Which breeds different kinds of athletes than basketball, football, rugby does. Just naturally, just because the way it is played, it is going to breed different kinds of athletes with different kinds of needs and everything else. And so I actually think that the way we coach it is either that schoolmasterly way or that footy coach way. And I don't think those are perfect for cricket. And I think that Livingston is just another example of someone who doesn't quite fit into those kinds of methods, right? And it's not to say that McCullum is bad at what he does, right? But I do think there is an element of like coaching is the issue at a certain point. Heisenberg said, would India still be winning the T20 World Cup if knockouts were played on black soil pitches? Well, they won in the West Indies. So they're the best T20 team in the world by a considerable distance. I think they could play on my arse cheeks and they'd still be a chance of winning. I wouldn't suggest it. RM says, 5 exciting young IPL players under the radar-ish. I don't think I really have a list of that yet. I haven't really gone through my IPL prep. I'm busy doing all these other things. So yeah, I haven't really gone through it 100%. I suppose you would have a look at the Chennai, some of the younger Chennai players. I don't know if they're really under the radar at the moment. I certainly haven't had a look at any of the smart kids coming through or anything else. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that I would do probably in the, I was going to say in the week leading up. We're almost at the week leading up, but a little bit closer to the tournament. I'm not someone who I kind of need it to be almost urgent for me to be able to do it, and then I'll sort of attack it from there. But that's it for today on the Wagon Wheel. Thank you to everyone. Really great questions as always. And please like, subscribe. Oh, also, I should do a shout out as well. It should be in the description here, but I'm not sure if it is. But we have a WhatsApp channel for good areas that we just started recently. We're putting some of the videos up natively there. We're putting all the links up to everything. Occasionally it's just me moaning or talking about something. I don't use social media all that much. And so I do use WhatsApp. So I thought having a good areas channel would work. I think if you search good areas, you should be able to find it. Even if you can just do it and mute it if you want. But anyway, you can help support us. All these things really do help. We had a really interesting piece on coaching. I feel like we had a couple of questions about coaching today. We had a really interesting piece about coaching go up. What's today? Wednesday. So Tuesday. And we've got another piece about wicket keeping coming up. So please keep an eye out for the wicket keeping one and go have a look at the coaching one. And we will see you again very soon for more Wagon Wheel and more Comboxing. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. If you want to be part of the community that makes content like this, head over now.